Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with CCW Europe, the podcast series bringing together the leading and brightest minds in the worlds of customer experience and customer management. I'm Simon Hall, your host and industry analyst at CCW Europe, and joining me on the sofa today I have Geoff Branch, a Northern Europe sales lead at Coveo, and Remi Preghenella, the Director of Product Documentation and Digital Adoption at Sophos. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
How are you both?
Good.
Good stuff. Well, to kick off these podcasts, I always like to begin by asking our guests to introduce themselves a little bit and provide some insights into their professional backgrounds and the work that they're doing in their current roles. So, Geoff, perhaps you can kick us off.
Sure. Thank you, Simon. So, I, as you say, head up Northern Europe for Coveo. I suppose we specifically focus on some of the regions around UK and Nordics, Benelux and France. They're sort of some of the stronger regions that we focus on. Been at Coveo now for 18 months, and I suppose my history at Coveo of those 18 months has predominantly been focused around customer and employee experience, and then more recently on the commerce side of things as well. But before I joined Coveo, I suppose I spent the last 15, 20 years now, I suppose, in and around customer experience, employee experience, and helping organizations improve that sort of element around CSAT, NPS scores and things like that. And then also around improving contact center performance and efficiencies as well. I suppose the reason I've always stuck at that is we're all consumers and customers. We know what happens when we get positive customer experience and how that drives our loyalty to that brand. And then probably what happens more often than not is around that negative experience around customer sort of experience as well. And obviously the impact that can have as well. So I think there's thankfully a world of improvement that can be had for organizations out there. And I enjoy trying to help organizations move the needle and help them improve.
Great stuff. Remi?
Yeah, so I've been working at Sophos for about 15 years and had different roles within Sophos, really. I started a long time ago just doing some localization, and then I moved to kind of working on the website, manage the documentation, and now I'm looking kind of more kind of a broad kind of role looking at the knowledge part of it. So it's product documentation, but it's also kind of knowledge base, as well as digital adoption. And digital adoption is helping our customers basically to use our products. Mm-hmm. And as Geoff said, really, I mean, it's really interesting because you always need to look at the customer experience and making sure people can find the right content to be able to self-serve themselves.
Fantastic stuff. So picking up on a lot of what you've just discussed there, the reason that we're here today is to unpack the Sophos-Coveo partnership and the work you're doing together with artificial intelligence. And I guess to frame our discussion, Remi, can you break down the challenges that Sophos were looking to solve by bringing Coveo into the picture? Where were you falling behind the curve with regards to your customer experience?
Yeah, so one of the challenge we've got is that we've got a massive amount of knowledge around disseminated through the company. So we've got our knowledge base stored in kind of Salesforce. We've got kind of documentation, which is kind of provided through different static websites. We've got content within Confluence. We've got content in Jira. So we've got a lot of different products that interacts with each other. And it was very difficult for us to surface all that knowledge internally and externally. So what we wanted to do was to find a solution that's going to help us in kind of aggregating everything and having a simple search solution. And that's where Coveo came in, really. It's just kind of helping us in kind of making sure we've got different sources that are kind of coming to a single point for customers.
Mm-hmm. And of course, introducing AI into a business in any capacity naturally requires a degree of organizational restructuring, the scale of which will depend on the level of anticipated transformation, right? So can you share any best practices around how you went about securing executive sponsorship and buy-in from all the relevant stakeholders?
Yeah, so I mean, we've done different things. And the first thing was kind of really kind of look at different products because Coveo is not the only one on the market, and we wanted to make sure that basically we tested different solutions. So Coveo was kind of really kind of one of the great solution because they've got a vast amount of kind of good case studies. Really, that was impressive. Lots of kind of different partnerships with kind of similar companies as Sophos, especially towards kind of technical side of things. And then, so through the testing, what we've done is calculating what was kind of the return on investment. And this is how you can really decide which product you're going to go for. And we looked at kind of basically the time to resolution for our agents, which how much we can decrease it, but also we had to look at how much content we would surface to our customers so that they can just kind of have the solutions very, very easily. And so in terms of kind of the executive sponsorship, I mean, the numbers spoke by themselves. It was just showing, okay, this is kind of what we want to implement. This is going to be the experience for customers, and that's how much kind of we're going to be able to deflect. And it was just kind of straight to the point and say, yes, this is the solution we need to implement.
Okay. That's great. And just piggybacking off the data and content challenge, that sounds like it's very important for you guys in terms of underpinning the success of this AI transformation. The interconnectivity, the quantity, the quality, the cleanliness of data are all critical considerations for you. So what work have you done or are you doing to ensure that you have everything in order on that front?
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, it's an iterative process, and this is something that's never going to stop. We always have to improve our data so that we can have the best kind of search results as possible. So one of the things we've done is that we looked at kind of all the content we had, and first of all, we wanted to remove all duplication. Duplication is kind of means that potentially we're going to give conflicting information to the customers. So this was kind of one big exercise. So we've gone through kind of legacy kind of documents, we've kind of removed and really look at kind of consolidating between kind of our documentation and our knowledge base, for instance. The second part is that we slightly changed the way we write the content because one of the things is that we wanted to make sure that the machine learning and the kind of the AI, especially with Gen AI coming up, is that we write kind of in a more conversational way, so that it's a lot more friendly to the users when kind of the machine learning and will pick up the content. And to do this, we've just kind of removed kind of colloquialism. We've been trying to write content which is kind of straight to the point, so we avoid kind of marketing fluff because this is impacting basically the results we've got. But not only that, but we've tried to keep things simple, small chunks so that the machine learning and the AI can just reuse these components. The longer the document you have, the more difficult it's going to be for the machine to identify the right content.
Yeah.
So this is what we've done. And as I said, we still look at kind of data so that we improve this kind of on a constant basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to add to that. I think, as you say, it is an iterative experience. It's not a case of one and done. Certainly, we see that with a lot of our clients is saying that it's, the first time you roll this out is the first step in that journey, and then using the insights to try and sort of change that sort of continuous learning behaviour. And I think the other thing we also see is around, as you said, the data. Yes, it's obviously getting it into the right sort of format, but I think a lot of clients ask us, especially in the early days, about how do we get the data clean? Do we need to do a lot of work? And actually, the easy answer is no. You can use the AI as well to give you a certain amount of assistance in that respect, because it will naturally elevate the good content, and it'll actually start to sort of hide and digress some of the the poorer content as well. So naturally, over time, that will evolve.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is looking at the metrics. We can identify kind of gaps in our knowledge. So we look at what customers are searching, and we identify gaps. And this is something that Coveo provides us. Is there some insights that just allows us to kind of bridge these gaps for customers by either kind of changing the terms in our documentation or just creating brand new content. And I think this is key.
Okay, great. And just pivoting on now to implementation, there's still a great deal of unease throughout the industry around implementing customer-facing AI for obvious reasons. So what were your key considerations when deciding to build out your first use case? What does your roadmap look like?
So the first thing is we had extensive testing. We wanted to validate the content internally. So we had kind of a team of peoples from kind of agents, from documentation, the knowledge base team, just kind of testing the kind of Gen AI component. We've all asked kind of different questions, and we rated the accuracy of the answers. So it was kind of rating the kind of linguistic quality, the quality of the answer itself, just to make sure that the content provided was correct. And because you know, we've, especially with Gen AI, we've got the kind of concept of hallucinations where the AI can just start kind of creating content out of thin air. And this is something we want to avoid, especially we're working in Sophos, is kind of a cybersecurity company. We want to make sure we provide the right information to our customers. So this was very, very important, is we wanted that the accuracy was correct and that we could give the customers the right information so that they had simple steps to implement their processes. So yeah, from the proof of concept we had, the feedback was pretty good. The accuracy was rather impressive. I mean, there's always kind of things that don't work as expected, but we've asked kind of this team of testers if they were happy to use the Gen AI kind of internally and externally, and we've got 70% of people that said yes, because the quality was good enough. So this was kind of the buy-in we wanted, is just kind of validation from the field, people that are going to use it day in, day out, and making sure they were comfortable with it. This is interesting because we always have also the concept of kind of Gen AI kind of potentially kind of threatening some jobs. And I don't think people were too scared about it. I think they realize that it's a good tool moving forward. And it means that they don't kind of do the same thing all over again. They can work on more exciting things. And I think that's an exciting challenge for people.
Yeah. Geoff, any implementation best practices?
Definitely. I think really just sort of touching base on what you were saying, I think, Remi, is that a lot of customers are going to test this internally first, maybe looking with their agents because they want to make sure that they get the accuracy and they're confident and comfortable before they externalize that in front of customers. So I think that's a very, it's a very sort of a typical way that customers have done that initial sort of phase around implementation because they can control that and obviously learn from that before they sort of go external. And then even then, sometimes when they have then started to look at this as an external sort of use case, then they start to do things like A/B testing as well, so they can really be sure about the impact it's having. So I think that's very typical. And then also I think in regards to the agent experience, you're right. I think people see this as sometimes a bit of a threat. Is like, are we going to lose jobs? Are we going to lose people? And I think very much actually it starts to improve that agent experience because I think as AI and now generative AI comes into it, you can start to do much more case deflection, drive self-service, which obviously has a massive impact to customer satisfaction because I think people naturally gravitate to self-serve first. I know I certainly do if I go to a website. But then if they do go to sort of raise a case, it can then start to help the agents to actually respond to that customer quicker. And it does help them to actually have that more meaningful conversation. So I always think that the self-service should really do that high volume, low value sort of interaction, that sort of very repetitive tasks. And therefore it's freeing up agents to have that really high impact conversation with customers and driving that value. And we certainly see customers having an impact on their agent retention. And I think it's because they're having a more enjoyable sort of experience. So definitely something we see in the marketplace.
Great. So we've talked there about stakeholder buy-in. We've talked about data. We've talked about implementation. Can you take us on a deep dive now about what your AI solutions are doing for you today? How have you improved the customer experience, and can you put some numbers around it?
Yeah. So numbers are always difficult to give, but I think in general what we've seen is that since we've implemented the solution, we've surfaced a lot more content. So we had kind of a look at what happened in especially last year, and I think for the first 6 months we had kind of about 800 kind of case deflection, explicit case deflection. So it's really kind of we can measure this, and this has kind of a big impact on customer experience, but also kind of cost for us, because every time you contact an agent, then you take time from the business. So I think for this part was kind of critical, really, is we see that kind of self-serving mechanism is working. And the more we surface documents, the more people are going to use it, and the system is going to get better and better. So I think overall the experience has been great, and we want to do more. As I said, we want to breach more content gap. We want to kind of index more content, and one of the things we've done, I've talked about kind of the documentation and knowledge, but we started to index as well some of the videos we've got, some of the community posts we've got as well. So we start kind of bringing a lot more content to our customers, which means that down the line, people will find exactly the content they want. So yeah, it's been very, very positive, and say it's an iterative work, and we continue working with Coveo and with kind of our CSMs just to make things better. We analyze data, we iterate, we change, we do A/B testing from time to time as well, just making sure that we're on the right track. But yeah, the results are kind of very, very positive, and we cannot wait to really kind of properly use Gen AI moving forward, because it's going to be even better.
Great. Geoff?
Just to add to that, I think looking at things like the standard sort of AI capabilities, I mean, typically, as you say, I think it all starts with around the impact and the business, goals and objectives that you're looking for. From across industries, we typically see sort of increase in self-service around the sort of 55% using standard AI. And again, that has a huge impact on reducing operational expenditure, because clearly, if they're self-serving rather than raising cases, that has a massive impact on costs and reducing those costs. And then also, I think, when cases are raised, typically what we see is a reduction in case resolution time by about 25%, because the agents have access to the relevant information to answer that customer's inquiry quicker. Again, impacts the customer experience, but also helps agents go through more calls per day as well. And I think, when we look at sort of case deflection, typically, we look at a case deflection rate of about 80% increase of case deflection. And then when we specifically look at things like generative answering as well, which is often the new sort of buzzword in the marketplace, then we've already seen customers. In fact, Xero, who is one of the first customers to go live with our capability, have gone public, and they see an increase in case deflection of 21% above and beyond what they saw before. So significant impact there. And I think if we look at other clients, we're starting to see very similar sort of low to mid-20 sort of additional case deflection rates. So again, it's already starting to increase that sort of performance our clients are seeing. So I'm sure we'll see more as that sort of goes through.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in terms of kind of the agent time, we've seen kind of a reduction of about 50%. So it's above the industry standard of 25%, which means that they've got more time to deal with more cases. Which is brilliant.
And I think in the more complex environments, I think that's just going to be accelerated, as you say. I think obviously a complex environment like yourselves, I think it helps the agents sort of compile that response in a very quick and seamless fashion, that they can then pass that knowledge on to customers quicker. And I think that's going to be something we see certainly in the complex environments that we typically work in.
But I think moving forward with Gen AI, this is something we can do directly to the customer rather than having to go through an agent. Is that the Gen AI will provide the right answer formatted properly with the steps directly to the customer rather than having to go through an agent.
Well, that's kind of a perfect segue actually onto my next question, which is around sort of the human piece of the AI adoption puzzle. Naturally, the long-term success of any AI or digital transformation initiative comes back to talent. So can you share any best practices around preparing the staff and the teams who are working closest with this technology?
Yeah, there's not much to do really. We had a look at it, and because the tool Gen AI is just a conversational tool, you don't need to do much. You don't need a massive amount of training. I think the only thing is we need to convince people to use it, especially internally. Just making sure they go to kind of the right search section of our kind of website or kind of the internal tool, so that they can get the most of the AI part. But in terms of training, there's not a lot. We know from kind of different sources, we always talk about kind of setting the stage for the AI and making sure we've got the right parameters. I think it's great if you want to have complex answers, and if you want maybe to have some code being given to you in a certain format. But for simple questions on how to set up a system, you don't need a massive amount of training. I think it's just enter your query in natural language, and then that's it. I don't know what, Geoff, you've seen, but
yeah, very similar. I think as you say, I think because the solution is embedded into the existing UI and the user interface that customers are used to. It could be the same customer portal. They're not going anywhere different. It's a single sort of search box. So for that adoption is usually pretty quick, because it's just continuing with the same journey they had, and very similar for the agents as well, because they're in exactly the same sort of application. Whether it's the agent portal, and again it's the single sort of user interface. They don't have to then do that typical swivel chairing that most agents have done with 8 to a dozen tabs open to try and find that answer. They just stay in one user interface. So actually what we see is that user adoption is very quick, because they can see the value in it, and I suppose that's really what's important, because if agents and users don't see value in it, they won't use it. And I think because it makes their day a lot easier and they can get information to answer a customer inquiry quicker, then typically it has a very quick adoption rate. And as you say, it's in an existing application, so training time is pretty much negligible. I think the only thing we do see is, I think you touched on this a second ago, actually, Remi, is around sort of our customer success team would then work with our clients to then say, actually, well, point one, how do we help customers get to that sort of initial sort of objective? And there's the measures of success, and then over time, how do we accelerate that? What's the next step? How do we improve and accelerate those returns that we're providing? So, yeah, it's usually pretty quick.
Yeah, I think although there's one thing maybe that in terms of training, and it's how do you search? Because the way you're going to search is different. You don't use keywords anymore. I mean, we were all used to have specific keywords to find the content. Now you don't need to do that. You just ask your question. And I think that's the big change, is that the way you're going to enter your kind of search query is going to be slightly different. As I say, it's just natural language. And that's the beauty of LLMs, really.
Well, looking more broadly at the search landscape then and the changing dynamics of consumer behavior, how is AI and more recently generative AI impacting the way that consumers are searching for and finding information? Geoff, perhaps that's one for you.
Yeah, happy to. I think, as you say, I think customer behaviour has been changing. I mean, AI has been around for a dozen years or so now. So I think customers and users and even employees have got used to sort of answering or asking questions in a slightly different way, being a bit more verbose. As opposed to sort of keywords, as when you look at sort of semantic sort of keyword searches back in the day. And I think generative has just accelerated that. Now people in their sort of normal sort of work and home life are using that sort of capability to ask more comprehensive and complex questions, or multiple questions in one sort of request. And because they're expecting things like ChatGPT out there, and that generative capability to provide a more personalized response is definitely something we see in changing behaviour. And obviously customers we're working with are seeing similar sort of changes as well in customer behaviour, because once people realise there's a capability and a technology out there, they embrace that and they expect other organisations to provide that same sort of level of response as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, just add, I think now we see Gen AI is everywhere. I mean, Microsoft is kind of deploying kind of Copilot nearly everywhere. You've got things on phones now using Gen AI. So this is going to become the norm. And I think that's it, is that we need to evolve and we need to make sure we use that technology, because otherwise we stay behind and people are not going to be able to search and find the content they want. So this is becoming the norm. And that's one of the big change, I think, in the industry.
Absolutely agree. And I think one of the things that I think you touched on as well, actually, Rem, is around the hallucinations. I think when we come to sort of enterprise organisations, I think, as you say, the expectation there is that generative is now an experience that people expect. But looking from an organisational point of view, is people then want to make sure, how can we make sure that the information we provided is validated, it's correct. So again, from our sort of side of things, we try to make sure that everything is grounded within that organisation's data and content. It's not going to go externally to that organisation's content and data sources, so we can make sure it's grounded in their own sort of content, and therefore avoids that sort of hallucinations, because that's usually people's biggest concerns, is what happens if it starts to sort of fill in the blanks from things that are outside of the organisation. You can't control it, it's not validated, and that's when some challenges can sort of manifest as well. So it's making sure that we can be grounded within that organisation's content is typically sort of paramount importance.
Yeah, and that's why really we want to have a solution that's going to enable us to use the kind of large language model with also our own content, because it means that we can control what is kind of shown to customers. The large language model will be kind of taking part of a conversation, but our own content will be kind of the technical information that is given. And this is very important. Not only we can control what is served to our customers, but we can ensure that it's of quality and it's updated on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, diving into some key takeaways before we wrap with a look to the future. And Remi, with all the work that you've done with AI so far, what would you say were your biggest learnings? What aspects of the transformation would you have done differently? Or on the flip side to that, what aspects worked particularly well?
I think with all these learnings and see how good it is and how kind of the technology is progressing, I think maybe we should have started to implement it earlier, because we would have had kind of much more experience. But it's fairly easy to learn nowadays. I mean, you've got plenty of kind of information on Gen AI.
Yeah.
I think it's just you need to kind of stay in touch of what are the best practices. I think if we had to do something differently, probably do it a bit earlier, to be at the forefront. But I mean, we've been using AI at Sophos for quite a while. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not as kind of a system to kind of return search, but we've used it for kind of machine learning, especially, which is kind of the ancestor or the grandparent of Gen AI, really, to kind of just do kind of automatic rules for detections for kind of threat in the threat landscape.
Yeah.
So this is not something new. We've been using it, but kind of for kind of customer service, that's kind of something we should have done a bit earlier.
Yeah. Geoff, any advice for brands looking to implement?
Yeah, I was really just going to add on to that. I think, as Remi said, I think once we saw the emergence of ChatGPT and generative in the marketplace, which is probably 18 months ago. It's not that long ago. Really, to sort of change the landscape. It drove an awful lot of excitement, but it also drove a lot of nervousness. And I think that's what we do see is sometimes people are being maybe a little overcautious. Where they could maybe adopt it internally, as you say, test it out internally, see sort of the power and the value that it can drive. And then absolutely go from there. But I think, it's driving a lot of excitement, but also some caution. There are some sort of horror stories out there. Typically, the ones you see and you read in the marketplace are where the content is not grounded, because, again, it's making sure that people only see content they have the access rights to see. So it's making sure you have that rigor and that process in place. But, as you say, just maybe sort of doing some testing, make sure you can sort of get comfortable and confident with it, and then start to roll it out accordingly from there.
Yeah, I think you need to find the right balance between the kind of the speed of execution and just launching Gen AI because it's fashionable and everybody's got it, with kind of making sure you've got the right data. And we've heard of horror stories and things that kind of you can break systems if you don't give the right information. So I think you need to be very cautious, not too much, but you need to still be sure that your content is safe.
Yeah, and I think we certainly sort of have a sort of a phrase internally. It's almost better to not provide a right answer than it is to provide a wrong answer, because the actual impact to the organisation, the brand, and everything else is very disproportionate in that respect. So it's the impact of giving a wrong answer is pretty impactful in the wrong way.
Yep.
So it's just making sure you've got the right controls and balances in place to make sure that you're giving the right information.
Maybe one thing is that when we use Gen AI, and when we're going to use Gen AI, especially with Coveo, we always have a disclaimer and say that to explicitly say that the answer has been provided by Gen AI. So one of the great things is that we can also do citation. So the AI will cite the sources, so people can always verify that the content is correct. And I think it's important. You need to know where your content is coming from. So for kind of a user perspective, you just reassure them that the content given by Gen AI is correct.
Yeah, it's just that transparency element, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, bring this home then, gents. You just touched on it there. AI is developing at breakneck speed and really disrupting the way that brands are communicating and engaging with their customers. But Geoff, come to you first. What are some of the innovations that excite you most?
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think the level of innovation now on sort of the generative side is pretty sort of fast paced. I think most people have got a lot of weight and sort of focus on that to drive things forward. And of course, there's a lot of sort of benefits that can be delivered by that. But I think the things that we see probably in the next stage at the moment, I suppose you've got that generative answer being compiled, is then going to the next stage, which is being more conversational. So again, if you've got a bit of information that's provided, that might draft another question in your mind, is then how can I use that as context to refine that question as well? So probably being more conversational is probably where we see the next part of that moving forward.
Yeah.
Remi, final words?
Yeah, I mean, everything is really exciting. We don't know what's going to happen in 6 months. It goes so fast, really, and people develop different solutions. But I think for me, what I want to have a look at, and especially coming from kind of a localization background, I want to make sure that this works in all the languages. We mainly concentrate on English at the moment. I know that Coveo's got other solutions in kind of French, German, Italian. But I want to see kind of more languages coming into the picture. And one of the things is that potentially kind of having a way to kind of automatically translate a question, find the answer, let's say in English, and then return it in kind of localized, which means that even if you don't have kind of some particular content available in one language, it will suffice it anyway. And these could change kind of really the way we create content moving forward.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for giving us a whirlwind tour through your partnership in the world of AI today. Thank you for coming on.
Thank
Thanks
you
for inviting us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
So that brings to a close this episode of In Conversation with CCW Europe. But please do stick around on the CCW Europe website and social media channels, where you can find so much great content related to customer management and the customer experience. Thank you once again to Geoff and Remi for joining me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, goodbye.